Can you move along? Someone's coming there. Oh, okay.
So busy this one.
I guess we're expecting it to be absolutely full in here.
Yeah, we've got some parents able to go.
Oh, okay. Right. I know we finish at 11:15, but that's the point at which you get everybody out. We don't need to finish earlier to get them out.
No. It's 30 minutes between the end of this talk and the next talk in case we've got loads of.
Does that look like everyone? Yeah.
We might have a few kind of parents filtering in the next few minutes, but if you want to make a start,
Fine, and you just put them at the back.
Yeah,
brilliant.
we'll do.
Yeah. And there are others in other overspills, are they?
I believe we're using the stream selector bit array as well.
Yeah. Right. Good. Okay. Thank you. Right, good morning, everybody. Can you hear me through the PA? Oh, I can begin to hear something. So I'd like to begin by welcoming you all to the medicine talk at the University of Manchester. I know it's early-ish in the morning, so I hope you've all had good journeying or came up maybe last night and have already enjoyed some of the city. My name's Professor Doug Caulfield. I have worked at Manchester now for some 14 years within the medical school, had various roles and various duties, but it's probably about 3 years since I was directly involved in admissions, and that's because Dr. Drew Tarmy, who's our Director of Admissions, was called away at very short notice when he had a surprise birthday event sprung on him. So I'm afraid I have to apologise. You're getting second best very much in terms of the talk today. But I do hope that I will be able to give you the information that you need to help you with your choice about Manchester as a place to study medicine. My talk will include background to the programme and then also some information about the admissions process. I'll talk for maybe half an hour, maybe not that long, and then we'll have some colleagues from the admissions team and also some of our students join me up on stage, and they will be able to answer your questions. And we know that for you, some of the best information you get comes from our students. So I hope you'll take the opportunity to ask them all the questions that are in your minds. And also, if you haven't already visited the medicine stand that is just down the corridor on this same level, then please do get along there, because there'll be more students, more information about the programme. So you're going around, you're looking at lots of different medical schools, I'm sure, and thinking about which is best for you. And everyone will be telling you that they're the best medical school, clearly. Well, the best, who knows who's the best? It depends really what you're asking, but or looking for. But we do think Manchester is different in the way that we approach the teaching of medicine. We're a very well established school in a large university with fantastic infrastructure in a great city, and we think that are elements that contribute to a really special experience if you come to Manchester that is different from what you'll get elsewhere. What I'm going to talk about, in a sense, most importantly from this perspective, is how you'll learn. You will, no doubt, when you read about medical programs, hear some that are described as being more traditional, some that are integrative, some that are very perhaps PBL-based. In reality, what you have to learn as medical students to become doctors is very common between all programs. So those differences in approach have perhaps reduced over the years, and particularly with the need to focus on clinical experience and the skills of working with patients. Those are common, however you, or whatever institution you'll go to. But we do have an important sort of structure to the program that supports your learning, which we describe as themed case discussions. What that means is across the first 4 years of the course, certainly, because in the 5th year you'll be concentrating very intensively on your preparation for practice, but where you're doing your learning of clinical knowledge, of the underlying subject areas across the first 4 years, we do that within themed cases. What that means is that each case has a few key elements that you would recognize as being important theme of the case that then structures your learning for that period of time, usually around the week. And in the earlier years, we use a method called team-based learning, where you tend to be in larger groups, but still discussing the cases together amongst yourselves, supported by the subject experts. As you move through the programs, those group sizes can change, and in year 4 in particular, you may be in smaller group sizes. But alongside those sort of team-based discussions, you'll also have lots of small group teaching as well, whether that's related to your clinical skills, your practical skills, some other discussion elements. So you have that structure throughout the program that you would recognize of themed case discussions. We talk about clinical immersion. The way you're going to learn your medicine is from patients. And so therefore, what we want to do with your, shall we say, theoretical classroom learning is prepare you so that you can learn effectively from the patients when you meet them in the ward. And those scenarios that you'll have been given on paper, should we say, when you're doing your theme case discussions, then when you go onto the wards, you'll see patients that are presenting features associated with those cases, and you'll be able to treat those patients both as the people that are being treated for their medical conditions, but also as those learning opportunities for you. So you do that, though, by really immersing yourself in the patients, learning from the patients, learning from the teams that are supporting the patients. It's not easy to learn medicine because things are coming at you from so many different directions, so many different ways of learning, so many bits of information. So we concentrate also very much at Manchester on what we call reflective practice, which means you think about what you're learning, you think about what you're doing, you decide, in essence, what you learned from it, perhaps what you should have learned from it, what went well, what you need to improve, and you come up essentially with an action plan. So next time you come across the same situation, you'll put that action into place and you'll improve. Many of you will play in sports teams, and you know that after a game, you'll have a debrief. You'll think about what worked, which part of the strategy in that game worked, what do you have to do next time. So it's something that, in fact, for most of you will be familiar, you just haven't applied it formally to your learning. And that reflective practice is something that's really important, both as you go through your undergraduate medical education, but also as you move into clinical practice. If you speak to anybody who's working in medicine, they are maintaining portfolios of evidence, maintaining their reflective practice across the duration of their working life. So much of what you do in medicine will also be related to the use of technology, both to support your learning and to support your clinical practice. So at Manchester, we make sure that you get the skills that you need for that. We were the first university in the country to provide iPads to our students to support their clinical learning. So you will be given your own iPad, your portable learning device, more important than the fact it's an iPad, that will support you through your learning. You'll be able to have information on it, take notes, use information, communicate particularly with the school through the iPad. When you need to be signed off on a skill, that'll be through your iPad, for example. So we will introduce you to the technology that you need to support your clinical practice. That moves, of course, beyond just the iPads. We will introduce you to the electronic systems you need for recording patient notes, for prescribing, as other examples. And then finally, what all that should do across the first 4 years of the programme is prepare you for practice, which is the focus then of year 5. In year 5, you'll be working very closely with the clinical teams, being that proto F1 doctor, who then will be ready for practice in the August of your year of graduation. Those principles of learning are supported by some great facilities. If you haven't yet walked past the Stopford building, just slightly further down the Oxford Road to the south, I think there are tours of the people will have signed up for, probably, if they're, yeah. So. Yeah, so some of you have the opportunity of getting into the Stopford building. It's sort of the heart of where the university-based teaching is. You'll also be taught in some of the facilities here. The Stopford and elsewhere has got some really great spaces for your own independent learning. This is an example of one of the study spaces in the Stopford Library on the 3rd floor. So you are spending so much of your time learning in groups, you will want to continue your independent study in groups as well. So you can do that in great space in the libraries, but of course you can also study individually in the library, access the books and the e-learning resources for your learning in the library and across the campus in multiple spaces for students. As you move away from the university-focused teaching after years 1 and 2, you'll be spending the last 3 years of the programme at one of our 4, what we term clinical education campuses. It's like a mini medical school, but at one of our big hospital bases either in Greater Manchester or in the northwest of England. And there, this is just an example of the kind of facilities you'll have there. In addition to the should we say, the library resources and tutorial rooms and lecture rooms, you'll also have dedicated facilities for learning your clinical skills that you began to learn in years 1 and 2 of the programme. To go into the structure of the course in a little bit more detail, what I've done here is break it down year by year for the 5 years of the program, the 5-year program that most of you will be applying to. In year 1 and year 2, predominantly within the university, but with early clinical experience, where you'll go out and have short placements in general practice, in the acute hospitals as well. And the learning within those first 2 years is very much structured, what you'd recognize as being structured around the, should we say, some of the body systems. So you can see life cycle, that we were talking about, the life cycle of the individual, life cycle of the cell. So it then begins to lead into pathologies such as cancer, which is obviously, as you'll know, a sort of disturbance of the normal cell life cycle. Cardiorespiratory fitness in the second semester, when you're very much concentrating on the heart, lungs and blood. Then in year 2, similarly, you'll move on to topics that are around the central nervous system, musculoskeletal system, mental health in mind and movement, and then nutrition and metabolism is considering, well, pretty much as it says, the nutrition side, the GI system, hormonal systems. All of those described by, should we say, the underlying basic sciences of the biology, but each of those weeks will have a theme, as I say, around a theme case discussion. So, for example, in semester 2, you may be learning about hypertension, which means from the physiology side, from the anatomy side, you'll be learning about the circulation, how the heart pumps, how the blood vessels work with the heart to maintain blood pressure. But at the same time, you'll be thinking about, well, how do these basic processes get disturbed to produce hypertension? How do we treat it clinically? Importantly, in addition, well, what lifestyle changes, for example, may a patient need to undertake to help improve their blood pressure? So you'll be introduced to topics related to behavior change, for example, behavioral social sciences. You know, why do people find it difficult to exercise, even though they know that exercise could be really good for their health and for their blood pressure? So in that way, you'll see that each week has many dimensions, not just the basic sciences in terms of the biological sciences, but also the behavioral social sciences. At other weeks, it may have something important to do with ethics and law, for example. In addition. So that's years 1 and 2 broadly. What you've got right at the beginning is ES, which stands for Essential Skills. You're coming into a very different environment where you've learning differently from school. Most of you coming straight from school, although there'll be also others amongst you who may be graduates, for example. But you'll all have a common period of time, a couple of weeks at the beginning of the first semester, when we will introduce you to all the new ways of learning, so that you have a nice gentle ramp in from where you were before to where we want you to be. Then as you move to year 3 is the first of the years in which you are now essentially learning from clinical practice. Across year 3, you will be undertaking a series of placements that in general medical and surgical areas, supported again by theme-based learning, theme case discussions and other learning from week to week. I'll come on to some of the additional sort of special elements of the years in just a moment. So year 3 is structured around the general medicine, general surgery. In year 4, you begin to explore the specialties in detail. So you have shorter blocks of time, typically 4 weeks, looking at neuroscience or women's health or child health, mental health, general practice, community-based medicine. So that is, having got the basic groundings, you can begin to go into the specialties in more detail. It's a very intense year. If you've got some of our medical students here, I'm sure they'll tell you, if you've got some later year students, what the flavour of each of those years is like. And then finally, year 5 is very much, as I mentioned earlier, the preparation for practice. You pretty much learned everything that you need to learn across the first 4 years, but now you've really got to apply it in practice so that you're ready to be a foundation year doctor in that August after you've graduated. So alongside that sort of core structure to the program, there are a number of specialized elements. I talked about your reflective practice, We help and support you in developing that reflective practice and reflecting on your learning and experiences through your personal professional development portfolio. That's the PPD. You'll have a dedicated academic advisor that supports you with that. We also talk about the personal excellence pathway as being something that's happening in each year where you have choices about what you study. And so in year one, you'll be working in small groups, researching a topic of interest to that group, presenting it at the end of the year, towards the end of the year, as a poster presentation. In year two, you'll do a more detailed dissertation in the subject that you've chosen. Year three allows you an extended period of working, about 9 weeks, perhaps in a laboratory, perhaps in a clinical area that you've chosen, working on a specific project there. Year four, perhaps not directly related to the PEP, but still a choice, a really important choice, is the elective. In year four, you can elect what you're doing, which means that you have scope to choose something that sits out of the program entirely. It meets some of the main aims of the program, but we don't prescribe what it is you're doing. And that may be an elective placement that you do internationally, so you experience some international element of medicine, or it may be something you do locally in the UK, but doesn't have to be within the university. And then year five, there will be another opportunity for you to undertake a PEP that is around quality improvement. So it's understanding how you could improve service within the health service, but again, an area of interest to yourself. There are also a couple of opportunities for you in year three and year five to do what we call a student selective clinical placement. So this is about you identifying an area that you think might be one of the areas you'd like to pursue postgraduate, and so you can explore that and sign up for that sort of 4-week block with in that specialty area. That's pretty much an overview of the program, and as I say at the end in the Q&A, be very happy to talk to me or the students or answer your questions about the program some more. What you're undoubtedly thinking about if you're applying in this next cycle, this next academic year, is about your application. Manchester, as part of the application process, will use the UCAT aptitude tests. Any of you looked yet at what the UCAT involves? Yeah, lots of you nodding there. Yeah. So as you'll know if you've looked, it's a combination of tests where it's looking at different intellectual skills. It also has a section that tests, or that has what they call the situational judgment tests. What we do at Manchester is that we will rank applications according to your scores in the UCAT. But also, rather than ranking the SJT, we will expect everybody to have scored within the first and second bands of the SJT. We won't consider applications from people who are in band 3 or band 4. And I can talk about how that's then used in our general application process more in a moment. Work experience is another big one that people have ask about. What do we require in terms of work experience, and can I get the work experience that's required or not? Has anyone undertaken any work experience? Some of you have, yeah. What was your work experience that you've had? GP, right. So in terms of sort of framing an application for medicine, what did you take from doing that GP placement? What did it help? Sorry? Right, okay, so you saw some of the transferable skills that you need for medicine. Yeah, okay. Why do you think we encourage people to do work experience? You found out about something that perhaps you hadn't known the importance of it in medicine. Anybody else think why we want you to do work experience? Yeah, please.
Well, there's ups and downs to medicine. It's not always going to be a good outcome, and you need to be prepared if there is a bad outcome.
Right. You won't have all heard, but the comment was about that you don't always have, medicine doesn't always go smoothly. There are good times and there are bad times, and for patients, good outcomes and bad outcomes. You need to be aware of that, shall we say. So I think both of those are examples of you having insight into medicine as a career. We don't require for your application for you to have done any particular work experience or amount of work experience. We know how difficult it is for students to get work experience. It shouldn't, your opportunity to apply for medicine shouldn't depend on personal contacts. It should be about what you all have the same opportunity of seeing. There are many ways in which, therefore, you can get insights into medicine. That can be through placements, but it can also be through going to online workshops, reading about medicine. Royal College GPs offers a very good introduction to medicine site. The Med School Council has many good resources that help people understand what medicine is. So you can come back to that phrase I used earlier, reflection. You can reflect on what being a doctor is. And that is really what we're expecting of you when we want you to get your work experience. And that'll come up in the interview stage of the application process. So just to remind you, no specific requirement or minimum requirement for your work experience for your application. What we do have, though, is a set of specific requirements in terms of academic requirements. So for next year, that will be, if you're coming in from school or without a degree, that will be 3 A's at A level, biology or chemistry as one of those 3 subjects, a second science subject in whatever subject you're interested in as a second science subject, and then a third A-level subject at an A grade that we don't specify what that subject has to be. Okay? So much broader than in the past. So please think about now, should we say, what you need rather than what you may have heard about in the past. We do require 7 GCSEs at grade 7 or above, so that's A or A star. And you need to have a minimum of a B or a grade 6 in English language and maths. If you're doing International Baccalaureate, you can see there, it'll mean more to you than to people who aren't doing IB, but it's 36 points with 3 6s at the higher level. I've talked about the UCAT. You'll need the UCAT score in time for your application. And what we're introducing for this round, although we aren't quite in the position to publish the final details, is that if there are any graduates, there will be a 4-year graduate entry pathway that we're offering at Manchester. So graduates can choose to apply for that pathway. Broadly, in broad terms, if they've got a 2-1 honours degree in an appropriate subject. I said that we didn't require you to say what your work experience was, or for that to be an important thing for the first round of the application. We also don't use your personal statement. We at Manchester, and in common with a number of other medical schools, will not use your personal statement. You can write in it whatever you like as far as we're concerned, therefore. If it's that extra subject that you want to write about as to why you want to do that alternative for medicine, your 5th choice, you can use it as far as we're concerned for that purpose. You need to check what the requirements around the personal statement are, though, for your other medicine applications. What we will do, though, is that we will send you what we call a non-academic information form, which will ask you and give you the opportunity to expand more than you'd be able to in your personal statement around these 4 areas. Your motivation for studying medicine, experience that you've got of teamwork, because team working is a really important component of providing successful patient care. Again, your experience. This is where you can talk about your experience of medicine as a career and your insights that you've gained about yourself and about medicine as a career. You'll be able to bring that out there. And again, my microphone's just gone off, hasn't it? So I hope you can, till it comes back on, I'll just speak up a bit. Or has it come back on? Yeah, thank you. Your hobbies and interests. And again, it's quite common for people to ask us, why are you asking about my hobbies and interests? I haven't been able to lead a troop up to the top of Kilimanjaro while they were playing musical instruments. Will that affect my chances to get into medicine? But why do you think we do ask about your hobbies and interests? Why would it be important to know that? Yeah.
Well-rounded people who aren't just all academics, not people who are just
So well-rounded people was this gentleman's response. And can you say why is that important?
Because medicine isn't just about being the intelligent, the academic, it's about having human-to-human contact connection.
Right, so people often develop and evidence those things through their hobbies and things. What about though someone was sort of was very artistic and painted pictures? Would that, you know, how would that be important, do you think, in terms of someone studying medicine? Yeah, please.
Shows how they can de-stress and have a balanced lifestyle.
A balanced life, yeah. That's really, really important. In addition to those additional qualities, and they may come out in other sections of your application, but it's also really important to know that you can deal with a very pressured lifestyle, and that you do have hobbies and interests outside medicine or complementary to medicine that allows you to have that, should we say, that work-life balance. And so that's why we are trying to see you and your resilience to cope with and enjoy medicine. And these different points will then come out at the interview stage. So what happens is, in terms of your application, you'll have got your UCAT score. You'll apply. We will do, or the admin team or the admissions team will do an academic sift to make sure you meet those academic requirements. Really encourage you to make sure that each institution that you're applying to, you meet those basic academic requirements. They'll all be similar but different. You know, if you apply somewhere and you don't quite meet their requirement on that first hurdle, then your application won't be able to go any further. But then we will, after that academic sift, we'll then take into account the UCAT scores. As I say, it's got to be a 1 or 2 in the SJT. What we'll then do is invite the top about 1,500, isn't it, for interview. We can't tell you what the score will be that you'll need to achieve, because each year will vary, both in terms of the people applying and also the UCAT can change the way they score things. But I think we have historical data, don't we, that can give some guidance to you about what scores we've used in the past. Then you'll be invited for interview. After the interviews, we will decide who we're making offers to, and then we'll make those offers, and those offers finally coming around February, March time. The interview, again, is something that I know you'll all be thinking about. We now use what we call multiple mini-interviews. So you don't just have one long interview talking to a couple of people about whatever the conversation covers, but we have 5 structured stations that will allow us to explore with you your qualities and skills in different areas. We will be looking at how well you can communicate in a patient-related scenario. We'll look, and in others, we'll be thinking, we'll look at how you can critically evaluate a problem and come up with a solution. So, you know, what's your critical thinking ability? Related to that, we'll also may have some exercises that look at your ability to solve problems. So skills that we think are important transferably, and you talked about transferable skills in medicine earlier, didn't you? So those transferable skills that are important for you to have as medics. Then we will come to that non-academic form. And so that's the point at which the person at that station will have your non-academic information form in front of them, and they will be able to talk to you about any aspect of it. So that could be your hobbies and skills, could be your clinical experience and your insights into why you want to do medicine, why you think you'd be right to study medicine. So I think that probably is a good point at which to stop for me. I think we've got some of the medical students and the admissions team going to come up. Are you on your own? A couple more. Well, do come in now. And, so thanks for your attention. What we really hope now is that you'll, while the others are coming to the stage, do think of those questions, maybe to clarify things that I've said or other things that you just want to know about medicine at Manchester. So come on. I don't know how we're going to do this with microphones. I think you're probably going to have to use that one. Do you want to begin by... Hello. So do you both want to take turns to introduce yourselves and say what year you're in?
Okay, so hi, I'm Helen. I've just finished my 5th year. I've been here for the last 7 years. I've also integrated in between. So Hi, my name is Ariana. I've just finished my 4th year. I've been here for 4 years.
So thank you both for coming up here. And in fact, your cue was something that I'll blame our Director of Admissions for, but a really important, oh, thank you, we've got other microphones now. Really important additional element of choice that we offer within Manchester is intercalation. And that's an opportunity to study for at BSc level or at master's level or even at PhD level. You take a year out from the main program, you step aside from the main program. BSc you can do after year 2 or year 3 or year 4. Masters and PhD you can do after year 3 or year 4. So maybe we'll see if anyone's got any questions about that, but thank you for that prompt to remind us. Gosh, and so you're on your last little bit of holiday before you start, and you choose to come back here to... So anyway, thank you. So can I ask, does anyone have any questions either about the experience at Manchester, the programme, or about the admissions? Yes, please. Yeah.
So I was wondering about, does Manchester have a policy where by the time you enter your first year, you have to be 18 years old? And if you don't meet the 18-year-old requirement as an international student, can my parents sign like a waiver to get me in, or can I apply for entry, or am I just not eligible?
So my personal experience, and I will check with admissions, is that we do admit students who are under 18. I think they'd expect to be 18 within the first period of study, but I don't know whether we can clarify that for sure and confirm whether it's similar or different for internationals.
Yeah, we will contact you. We have a minors process in place, and you will hear from us, or your parents will as well. And we just need their consent that it's okay for you to come to the UK and study here.
Thank you.
Do you want me to walk up?
Hmm?
Do you want me to walk up with the
Oh,
microphone?
do you want to? Yeah,
For the
thank you.
students, yeah.
Hi, and we've been joined by a further student. Hi, John. Borrow a microphone and introduce yourself.
Hi, I'm Tom. I've just finished my 3rd year here at the university. I also took a gap year before, and I'm integrating next year.
Great, thank you. Please, yeah, I think a microphone's coming to you now, so hopefully we'll hear you more clearly.
In terms of graduate entry medicine, is that just a new thing that's happening this year, and will that be for the foreseeable future as well?
Yes, we are introducing the programme. It's just going through it's gone through the very final stage of approval, so we know it's going to be happening, but we haven't got it live out on the website. So you'll be able to apply this year for graduate entry for 2024.
And will that be for the foreseeable future as well?
I'm sorry?
Will that also be for the future years as well?
Oh yes, it'll be open for future years as well. Yes, it's we're regarding it as a new programme that will be around for as long as we hope. I'll see you down there, so we won't forget you. But just see the question up here.
For undergraduate entry, how many applicants do you get per year, and how many of those get to interview?
For the undergraduate, did you say? Yeah, I think is.
And we interview about 1,600, and this year we've offered 700 places.
As you'll realise, we are offering more places than we have places available, because many of you will get multiple offers. You'll have your first choice, your second choice, and ones that you may not choose to come to. So that's why all the medical schools offer more places or offer more than they have their places, and then it all sort of works out in the summer when people have made their final choices and got their results.
For accommodation, how far away is it usually from your lectures?
So maybe direct that to were you, any of you guys in halls of residence in the first, second years, or do you want to talk about where they are and maybe your experiences of them?
So I was in Denmark Road, which is practically across the road from the med school. But then for all the other years, I've lived in Fallowfield, which is 10, 15-minute bus journey away. Pretty much all the buses that you'll see coming past the building will go out to Fallowfield, and that's where most of the students end up living. I've been there for 6 years now.
I was going to say it's very common, isn't it, for students to have 1 year in hall of residence and then stay in that Fallowfield area. Yeah. Of course, I think though, as students move to the clinical education campuses from year 3 onwards, then they may decide whether they want to commute from, should we say, that central area, or whether they move out to some of the more local areas. So I think there are little student areas around each of the hospital campuses. Yeah.
Just to clarify as well, so in first year for uni halls, there's like 3 zones. So you have like a city zone, Victoria Park, and then Fallowfield, which is the furthest one out. City is very convenient, like we were saying. It's at Denmark Road, which is across the road, I think. Victoria Park is where I was. I was at Burkhart House, which is maybe a 15-minute walk away. Fallowfield, you could walk it, but most people take a bus, and students get like a discount for the year, so that's what most people do. So first and second year, you'll be based here at the university, so you'll be living around this area, furthest probably Fallowfield. But from clinical years onwards, depending on which hospital base you are, you're probably not going to be living near the university. You're going to be finding some kind of accommodation near your hospital.
I think there are a couple of questions down the front here. Someone who's been waiting patiently, so thank you. Do you want to raise your hand, who it was that wanted to ask the question? Right on the front, oh, with the beanie.
So if you didn't get like all 7s, but you did really well in like your UCAT and predicted grades, will you not have a chance of getting in here?
The academic sift comes first, so you do have to meet those requirements of the GCSE and the A-levels. One point that I didn't make at the time that is, I think it's new for this year, or was certainly very recent, is we don't look at predicted grades anymore. So that's a big change maybe from what a lot of you might have been expected. We will base it on your UCAT score, your interview, and then you will be required to get those grades when you sit your A-levels. Caroline, Louise, can you use the microphone to respond to that?
We will check your GCSEs as well in our academic sift, so you have to definitely have those. But like Doug said, you will need all 3 A's at point of offer or A-level results.
For students who do a 4th A-level, do you require that to be an A, or do you ignore it completely?
It's just the 3 A's, isn't it? Yeah. So for the 4th A-level, effectively you're just choosing to do that. We don't look for a 4th A-level. We want students to be as successful as possible, so if you focus on 3 A-levels for us, that's no detriment whatsoever. And in that sense, it's not an advantage as well for doing the 4th A-level either for us.
Okay, so for example, if it wasn't up to an A, it would just
No, it wouldn't be tracked. So if you've got your 3 A's, it doesn't matter what the grade of the 4th one is.
One of the points to say about that is if you do maths and further maths, it isn't counted as 2 separate. So just be aware of that if you do 4 A-levels.
Again, can you use the microphone because the acoustics here aren't very good?
So just be aware, maths and further maths don't count as 2 separate. So if you are doing 4 A-levels, but one's maths and one's further maths, they won't count as 2 separate. So if you do drop one, make sure it's one of the maths or the further maths ones.
Do any of you do music or sort of other activities, and do you find you have time for them?
Could you? I couldn't hear that, I'm sorry.
Do any of them do sort of music or other activities like that, and do they find they have time to do them?
So yeah, there's a lot of sport and music societies, this sort of orchestra type things, particularly if you come from, like, a lot of people played in school bands and stuff at school. There's similar things at the university, both university-wide, but you'll find a lot of the university-wide societies is a medic-specific one as well. So for first and second year, you normally get Wednesday afternoons off, which is university-wide sport and things that you can get involved in. I've been part of cycling the whole way through uni, and that's been I've managed to do that the whole time I've been here. With the medics teams and the medics music and stuff, you see more of the later medics go into the medic-specific ones, just because things like rehearsals and whatnot will be later. So even if you're on placement, you can still attend. So they are aware of that, and you can still get involved for all the years you're here.
In terms of interviews, do you have to be on campus to do them, or are they like online? The
normal requirement when we ask completely post-COVID, which I think we are, is that they will be on campus.
Because I'm going to take a gap year and I'm not going to be in the UK when the interviews would be conducted.
Oh, sorry, I thought you were talking about our assessments. I beg your pardon. What did you say?
So for the interview stage.
For the interviews, we are, as I understand, but again, we can check that. There will be a mixture of on-campus, face-to-face, and remote
So if you weren't
interviews,
to
but I'm not quite sure how that's. I think, yeah, Louise, do you want to answer that?
Yeah, so there will be, the majority will be on campus, in person here, or we will give some availability for Zoom interviews. When we do invite you to interview, it will be a first-come, first-served basis, so if you know you definitely can only do those Zoom interview dates, make sure you put you choose your date quickly. Yeah.
What I'd say is we will treat applicants that are interviewed by Zoom or interviewed face-to-face completely equally, and we've got a lot of experience of doing them in both ways, so don't worry about having any relative advantage. The only thing I'd say is I think it's great for you in trying to feel that you're making the right choice of medical school if you can get along for that face-to-face experience, because you'll also have other opportunities to sort of learn about the place just through that experience, and then also through the offer holder days that we will let you know about after we've made the offers, when you can again come along. Does that help? Yeah.
Do you still give reduction? Do you still give a grade reduction for EPQ?
Where I'm having problems hearing that, and I can't say. It just helps to look at people. Yeah, sorry.
Do you still give a A-level grade reduction if you're doing EPQ at college?
If you get a grade reduction for what?
Doing EPQ at college?
No, we don't look at EPQ. We do have widening access programs that can affect the grade, but those are predominantly but not exclusively related to the Manchester area, aren't they again, Louise? And I think people will know if they're, or they'll have the sort of the flags on their applications and offers if that's the case. But EPQ, no, it becomes something that you can bring out in your non-academic statement, in your interview if it's relevant, but we don't give marks for that or scores for that or adjustments to the grade either.
Is there any foundation courses you can take if you haven't met all the GCSE requirements but your A-levels are on par?
We do have a foundation program, but that is largely related to students who've got non-science A-level requirements. I think in terms of those, should we say, classic foundation courses, those you find at other universities, but not at Manchester. As I say, we've got a foundation year for students who've done the non-science A-levels, but have still met the same academic grade.
I wanted to ask about like contact hours and independent study. Is it like a full timetable of lectures and clinical sessions, or is there also a lot of time for like independent learning?
Do you guys want to talk about the truth about the curriculum?
Changes depending on what year you're in. So first year, it sort of runs mainly Monday to Friday. It is a mix of sort of in-person sessions online, sort of lectures and kind of anatomy sessions and things like that. In between all of them, there's time for independent study. You do get enough time for the independent study, and it is sort of dependent on what year and sort of what level of the course you're at. So first and second year, it's a mix of all those sort of sessions you were talking about, as well as time for independent study, because you'll find that you might have anatomy on a Monday afternoon, but your friend might have it on a Friday morning, so you probably won't have anything on the Friday morning. So you do get those times. It gets less and less the further you get through the course. So second year, it's slightly less time because there's more stuff to learn. It sort of eats more into your own time. And then third, fourth and fifth is when you're clinical. So basically any work outside of your clinical placement is on your own back.
Do you want to describe what a clinical, we can often talk about the early years sort of in most detail, but can you say what a sort of a typical week of learning in a clinical year would look like?
So again, it changes. So for third year, you kind of get told things like when ward rounds are and when clinics and things are, and you sort of shadow people on that. You'll often sort of be in like clinic with a consultant, so you'll be talking through the cases as time goes on. So for third year, it's more the sort of what they class as general. So it's things like cardiology, respiratory, general surgery, and things like that. For fourth year, you have a few more placements. It's a similar sort of thing. You also have a case that you do throughout the week. You have one in third year as well, but for the fourth year, it's specific to whatever placement you're on. So you'll be going through that at the same time. So you'll have a teaching session on that at some point in the week. And then for fifth year, you'll find you're sort of more following the juniors, because you're basically learning how to be an F1, following the F1s around. So the way I would sort of describe it is third year, the placements sort of stay the same, but third year is kind of more generalised, fourth year is more specialised, and then fifth years are you safe to be a doctor.
Is it fair to say that in some ways the timetable in the clinical years is there, but it's a lot more, should we say, fluid than in the earlier years, and so you've got to be more flexible about the way you use your gaps in your time to keep up with your studies? That's one of the reasons, in a sense, we introduced the iPads, because we wanted students to be as efficient with their time as they could be, so that you could sit in the waiting room almost, doing some studies while you're waiting for that gap between the GP's clinics.
Yeah. It works in your favour as well, because if you get everything done in the hospital that you need to, you then have that time that you can use as independent study. So if you're efficient with your time, you make more time for yourself, basically.
Yeah.
So you're not stuck to a timetable whereby you've got to be in this time till this time every single day.
Someone raising their hand at the front. Let's see if we can manage without the microphone.
For those of you that did intercalate, like, what options are there and what was your experience with it? Like, would you recommend it to other people?
So I intercalated. I did a master's in neuroimaging. There's a lot of courses you can intercalate in Manchester, and every year they set up an intercalation fair. So it's slightly similar to what you sort of see, where you've got all the tables with the different courses and things. They set one of those up in the med school with all the different courses that you can do. One thing I found is the range that you can intercalate at Manchester is significantly larger than the range you can intercalate at some of the unis. So I left the med school completely, so I was under a different school and everything for the year that I intercalated. I'm probably not the best person to ask with regards to how it was, mainly because I intercalated September 2020, so I was a COVID year, so all of mine was completely remote. I'd recommend it to anyone. Medicine is a long course. It's nice to take a year out and do something, particularly if you've had an interest in something else or just want to experience a different part of uni as well. It doesn't, as it stands, it doesn't count for anything towards a foundation programme, which is what it used to a few years back, which is why a lot of people intercalated. But I mean, that's changing again for the following years. We don't quite know what's going on with that, but it does still count towards like specialty applications later on in your career. So it's one of those, once you've done it, it's on your CV forever. So it's purely, I wouldn't just do it for having it there. It's something you need to enjoy it, but it is a nice break from medicine as well, because it's a long course.
I think that point about the as well as it enjoying it in its own right, people do think about how it helps build their CV, and undoubtedly I think that people are looking at it in that relatively short term, how will it help with my points of foundation. But I think the point you make about specialty is really important. Increasingly, although there is a sort of nationally, you might say, a shortage of doctors, it still becomes very competitive to get into the programs that training programs that you're interested in. And a lot of people will take additional years after F2 to build up their CV to then apply for specialty training. And still doing intercalation will have should we say, helped you develop your CV, arguably in a much more effective way than that additional year after F2 would be my sort of take on things. There's someone holding up the hand in the middle. I know there's someone at the front who's been very patiently waiting, and we'll come down to you in just a sec. Yeah, please.
I have a question about, I want to know, like, do you accept a higher education diploma instead of A-level? Or how likely to get alpha with that one?
That sounds like quite a specific admissions query, so I'm going to ask if Louise can possibly answer that.
We do accept the access to HE diploma, and if you come back to the admissions desk with us, we can give you specific requirements for that. And it's the same. If you've got A-levels or the diploma, we consider your application equally. It's on your performance at interview if you get to interview.
Let's see if we can hear your question without the microphone.
For lectures,
how are lectures split between online and face-to-face? There was obviously, I mean, if you go back before, and COVID was a disruptor in the sense of how learning was structured, and there were sort of good things and bad things at the time, and then afterwards we're trying to keep the good things and lose the bad things, if you know, very simplistically. So I think beforehand everything would have been face-to-face, obviously, but we would have had recordings of all of those lectures. And so even at that point, you would see that there were, at the beginning of the studies, I would say everybody mostly comes to lectures because they don't know any different and they're learning. But I think it's fair to say then you tend to get two groups of students. Students who prefer to come to the lecture because they like that live interaction, and others that feel actually they're going to review the lecture anyway, so why not do it offline? They'll do it at their own pace. Maybe they don't get up well for 9 o'clock, they'll get in for a 9 o'clock PBL, but they're not so keen to get in for a 9 o'clock lecture, and if it works really well for them to see the same lecture at 11, then they'll do that. And I think from that, what we tried to do then is evolve from when we did all the lectures online and worked out how to do online lectures as best we could, that there are some lectures that are best done live, but some students may still choose to view them offline, and other lectures that can be delivered very well offline. But in fact, what they shouldn't be, those offline lectures shouldn't just be 50 minutes of someone talking at you, so they'll be structured in a different way. They'll maybe be broken down into mini lectures, maybe have some learning associated with them. So you can't, in that sense, directly compare how many do online, how many do offline, because they're all live, because they'll have slightly different characteristics. But at the moment, we're still expecting a number of hours of face-to-face lectures, but also offline learning resources. But we have to be very careful, because it's very easy then to create a lot of offline learning resources that you then have to choose which you're going to use, because we're sort of in danger of overwhelming you. So there's a lot of choice. I mean, who's gone? All of you have still gone through a slightly that sort of COVID-influenced lecturing, haven't you? So I'm sorry we haven't got a current year 1 or year 2 here to tell you how it's gone for them, because inevitably those are the ones who, should we say, most affected by that. Years 3, 4, 5, I think it's fair to say we've always had that hybrid package. There will always be some face-to-face teaching, but it's very much around the Friday classes in year 3, isn't it? And then themed case discussions in year 4, and lots of online resources to support that. You looked like you were ready to say something.
No, I was before any of it was mainly online, so most of mine was in person.
That traditional one, yeah. So do you still remember my sink plunger? Do you still remember my sink plunger lecture? You remember my sink plunger? Oh, good. One of you does. What? Oh, yes. Oh, then it became online. So, yes, that was one of the biggest transitions from going face-to-face to going online. I could lift a bit of furniture using a sink plunger live, but online it had to be a tin of baked beans and a tiny little plunger. So there, we're adaptable. Sorry, moving on from that personal experience.
You've mentioned that... Over here.
Thank you.
You've mentioned that you don't look at the personal reference. What about the tutor reference? Do you take the same approach?
I can't answer that. I'm going to look to Louise, because obviously there are some things that are covered in that. Yeah.
We do check your references to check that it is a suitable application for medicine. Yeah, we will read that.
Exactly is that each station lasts about 8 minutes with a couple of minutes break in between, and it's Dr. Tarmi, and he's sort of talking about this, if he were here, would say it's a bit like speed dating. I hope we get a little bit more out of it than we get out of speed dating, but the student will move on a rotation, 8 minutes in this station, 2 minutes gap, move on to the next one. Is very much modelled on how clinical skills are tested in assessments within, well, both undergraduate and postgraduate. If you're not at the bedside with a real patient, then you have these very structured scenarios where the student is expected to do certain things. But they will have been prepared for those in the sense because all their learning and their skills teaching will have led them up to that. So there oughtn't to be any surprise for a student when they go into those. You're obviously, or the applicants are coming in a little bit less prepared in that way. So what we do say is that, well, you can expect that there will be a station in which you're focusing on communication, and you can expect to have a conversation with an actor playing the role of a patient, for example. You could expect in another station to be effectively have a conversation with one of the academic members of staff about perhaps a contemporary issue in medicine. And that, if that's the case, very commonly we're not looking for a right answer or the right opinion to have. We are looking for people to be able to discuss things. So I think so you have 5 of those stations, and they're each individually marked to produce an overall mark. Does that help? Hi, right at the front. Let's. Louise, can you say a little bit more about contextual offers?
Yes, so for anybody who's classified as a WP plus or plus plus applicant, we do lower your grades and your offer. So it's usually about 2 grades, ABB, and that will be in your offer. If you want to check your eligibility for the contextual offer, there is a link on our website that will direct you to that to see if you are. Your application comes through to us, it is automatically marked, so we know what to offer you.
Okay. Someone just in front of you with a black sleeves holding up.
Can we ask?
Oh, yeah, sorry.
Yeah.
How does the funding work for graduate entry?
How does the funding work for graduate entry, did you say? It will depend, in a sense, the number of years that you're eligible for will depend on what you've done before. The NHS has the bursary from the NHS that in a 5-year undergraduate programme supports typically the last year of study, supports a longer period for graduates. So there will be a fee requirement. It will depend on the individuals, what they're eligible in terms of that fee support. Most graduates coming onto the 5-year programme are having to self-fund to a much, should we say, greater extent than people coming on undergraduates who haven't had any study. But I think it's the shorter duration of the programme, and it's the fact that for eligible students, a greater level of NHS support that makes it more attractive in that way. But forgive me, a lot of these things about funding are so individual, I wouldn't want to give too specific an answer to you like this. I think we're coming down just there. I think that it.
I was just going to say, should we just take this last one, and anybody else that's got questions, because we're coming up to 11:15. We are in the atrium. If you go back that way, along the atrium to the end, you'll see us in there. There's an admission stand. There's more ambassadors there for you to talk to. So any more questions we can take in there.
Where can you go for placements?
Where do you do the placements?
So for Manchester, you get assigned a base hospital, or is it CEC?
Clinic, yeah, we talk about clinical education campus, yeah.
So you get assigned one of those, so that's either MRI Oxford Road, which is just down here, Wythenshawe, which is South Manchester, Preston or Salford. And basically once you get told what your base is, you have an idea as to where your placements can be. So for myself, I'm based at Wythenshawe, so most of my placements have been Wythenshawe and Stockport, with a couple in Crewe and Macclesfield. It was one thing I quite liked about Manchester, is once you knew what your base was, you had an idea as to what area your placements could be in, and it's actually it's a significantly smaller area than some of the places that you'd find at universities, where you can kind of be anywhere over the region. But yes, it's dependent on what your base hospital is. All of the ones for Manchester, for MRI, Wythenshawe and Salford are commutable from Manchester. It's just Preston where you end up going to Preston.
Yeah, but then Preston, everything is very local. There's less commute out to other bases, or to other hospitals. Right, well, we're going to have to draw a close to it there. Thank you all so much for your interest. And I'd like to thank the admissions team who supported this and our students. So if you wouldn't mind...